Hey Lee, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing all right. Just living life in a pandemic.
Living life in a pandemic. Yeah,
Surviving.
yes, you're still here. Yeah. For those who are
Yes.
listening who don't yet understand, we're recording this in 2020. This we're actually recording this December 11th, 2020. So we're getting near the end
Right.
of, I don't know what you think, Lee, but I think this is definitely the wackiest year that I've been alive. I don't know how you feel about it. It's been a wacky year in so many ways.
It's certainly the I mean, it's definitely the wildest year I've experienced. I feel like I've lived through a good amount of history, perhaps too much history.
Hmm.
With 9/11 recessions, just endless wars. It's been quite a run. But I would say, out of all of that, from a year standpoint, this has been the wildest one
Yeah,
by
absolutely.
far.
Yeah, I have a feeling we'll probably get into this because, it's
Um,
kind of hard not
yeah,
to talk about this when you're on a podcast. But before we get into that, I'd love if you would
sure.
give us a brief intro, who you are, where you are in the world, what you're up to, and then we'll kick us off that way.
Sure. My name is Lee Sachs. I am a producer and I live in Los Angeles, California. I grew up in New York and I moved to LA about 13 years ago now.
Hmm.
And I work in entertainment. Used to work in feature film development and production. Then I got into marketing and advertising production and digital content. And now I am freelancing
Nice.
post a long pandemic stretch
Yes.
of not
Yes.
not working much.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I've
Well,
worked in a lot of different capacities as a producer.
yeah. Very nice. And I know we're going to talk a lot about that today. So we'll
Sure.
keep the audience in suspense. As a producer, you don't want to give them everything up front, right? Because then they'll just
No, no,
tune out
no.
and go listen to Dak Shepard or something. So we want to keep them here
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the podcast with
You
you and
gotta
I.
you gotta hold your cards close to your chest.
Exactly. So I'm not even going to ask you about this because I'll ask you about this later. So I am ready to get right into this and have the audience get to know you. And for the audience listening, I don't really know Lee other than we spent a nice 45-minute chat a couple weeks ago. And I said, hey, like you'd be a great guest to have on my show. So here we are, as I was telling Lee, this makes it really fun for me to get to know people that I admire and I find interesting. And then I get to have a conversation with them and then I get to release that conversation out to the real world. So people will be listening, Lee. So Lee, first question I have for
Yes.
you. What's something that you nerd out about?
Oh man, I nerd out about so many things.
I'll bet.
Mostly, I nerd out about food and beverage. I nerd out
Uh-huh.
about a lot. It's the thing in my life that I most love: restaurants and cocktails and new and exciting food to eat. So that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. Honestly, is
Yeah.
new food. I would say.
All right.
And then being a producer, movies I nerd out about. That's the thing that I love the most in the world that brought me to Los Angeles. So movies and food are my big touch points, I would say.
Man, there's so much gold here to ask you about. I'm in over here. I'm like, what? Because I love movies. I love food. I love drinks. And I'm
Yeah.
super interested in this. What do I want to ask you first?
Okay.
Oh, let's see. I want to
The
start with the
world's
food
oyster.
thing. Yeah, the world is, well, it is my show. So I can
Sure.
kind of ask whatever I want. And you can choose
Exactly.
not to answer. But yeah, so I'm
Exactly.
curious about food. You mentioned restaurants. Do you also like to cook?
I this is a funny aspect about me. I cooked 0% of my meals before the pandemic. And when I say zero, I mean zero. I did
Wow.
not have a pot or a pan in my apartment until the pandemic started. Actually, that's not
Wow.
true. I have two friends who bought me a pot and a pan as a joke at my birthday last year because they knew I didn't own a pot and a pan. So when the pandemic started, I had no food in my house and I had one pot and one pan. And my mother had bought me some housewarming, plates and silverware. But other than that, I had nothing. And I've gone from 0 to 100 since the pandemic started. I cook almost every meal that I eat, except for kind of on the weekends when I
Yeah.
get takeout.
How's it
So
been?
and I'm just starting. It's been pretty stagnant since the beginning. I kind of fell into, because I'm not a bad cook just naturally. Just
Yeah.
there's a handful of things that I do well enough that don't make me sad, like that I can roast and
Sad.
and saute and yeah, that I can create some
That's
things
funny.
that are actually quite good. But about, I don't know, I would say a month ago, I sort of realized that, man, this indoor lifestyle is going to exist for a while. And even when things loosen up, I'm going to be spending a lot more time in my apartment. And so I've committed to trying to up my cooking game as of like 3 weeks ago. So I'm going to try to get better, learn how to be a better cook and to cook new things. Because I've just been cooking the same things almost on rotation since the pandemic started.
That's good. You're expanding your horizons in the middle of a pandemic. Okay.
Yeah, and I haven't been doing anything else like that. So this is a new territory for me.
There you go. That's cool. That's very cool.
Yeah.
And I want to talk a little bit about movies, and I know we're going to talk more about kind of your career and what you've done in movies, but I'm a self-proclaimed movie snob, which is really annoying to my wife.
Oh yeah?
And meaning I'm a big movie person. So, and I think I've talked in the podcast about this with somebody else who's in the entertainment industry. My brother is a real he's not even a movie star. He's just a real cinephile. And so he created this tradition 11 years ago now, where every year, myself, my brother, my sister, my brother-in-law, usually my sister-in-law, and my sister-in-law's mom, we watch every Oscar-nominated film for Best Picture, and then we blog about it. So we like rank them, we stack rank them for ourselves, and then we write a little excerpt. It's actually really fun. So I've seen every Oscar-nominated film since 2010.
Oh, cool.
And so but this year's weird. Like I starting to see some of these lists coming out, and I'm not really sure how. I don't know. Have you heard? Are they doing the Oscars this year? Like what? Have you heard anything about that?
They they are doing the Oscars. They just announced the team that's going to produce it. I can't remember who's on it except for Steve Soderbergh. I know Steve Soderbergh's on it. They claim there's going to be an in-person component, but I mean, I think it's going to end up looking like how the Emmys looked, with like a hybrid of live stream from a studio, live stream from backstage, people on Zoom. I think it's going to take on that kind of feel because I just don't see things being safe enough for a full-on ceremony at that point. But maybe it's possible.
Yeah, we'll see.
Who knows? But it's going to be interesting because the rules are changing too. So they are allowing certain films for consideration because theaters have been closed. So
okay. I didn't know that.
A seismic shift in one of the many seismic shifts happening. Yeah, because there's certain qualifications for the Oscars about being in certain number of theaters for a certain period of time in certain markets. But
I didn't know that
wasn't possible this year.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of strict rules about how to qualify. Yeah.
All right. So that makes sense. I figured the answer to this, and yes, I could have done and Googled all this, but you're here on the podcast with me, so it struck me to ask you this right now. The other question I have for you on a personal level is, what is your, like, if you had to pick a movie to watch, and let's just say tonight, like, I'm like, hey, Lee, you got to pick one movie to watch tonight. What would you pick? It could be something new you haven't seen. It could be something that could be your favorite. It could be depending on the mood of the day. What would you watch?
I mean, it definitely swings with my mood for sure. So if I was looking for some sort of comfort, I'd probably watch something that I grew up adoring, like the first, Tim Burton Batman or Back
Such
to
a
the
good film.
Future or Indiana Jones or something, And for new movies, I'm really excited to see Minari, which is a new movie that came out this year that I haven't seen yet, and I don't actually know if it's available yet. It's about a Korean-American family from A24, and it looks just like a beautiful family immigrant story.
Nice.
So that's a movie I'm really excited to watch at some point this year.
That's cool.
So it really depends upon my mood.
I'll offer up mine. I was thinking about this. On my top 10 of all time is Mad Max Fury Road, and I realized I haven't seen it in a couple of years. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to watch that sooner than later. I love that film. I got an argument with my friend because he's like, it's so dumb. There's no plot. I'm like, It wasn't even an argument. I'm like, you're an idiot. I'm out of here. like, I'm
Yeah,
just going to
sometimes it's
disagree
not
with you,
even
and we're
worth
never
having
going to.
the conversation.
Yeah, no. Like,
Yeah.
do you
That was
appreciate
that's a
anything?
great movie.
Oh God, the first time I
Right.
saw it, I remember it came out, and I was like, oh, I like the first one, and I like the second one. And I was like, oh, Mad Max. I'm like, and then the reviews came out. I'm like, wow, this is getting good reviews. And then I went and saw it, and it was one of those few movies where I walked out. I'm like, that was an experience like I've never had before. And it's just it's a cool film. And part of the reason I bring this up, I don't know if you saw this, the guy who plays the Nemesis in Fury Road, he just died this week. I forget his name, but he just passed away.
Oh, I think I did hear about that. I forget his name as well.
Yeah, and
that movie's wild.
It is. It's wild. And what's interesting about that actor, he was in, I believe he plays the bad guy in the first Mad Max, the original Frank Miller 79 Australian Mad Max. And then they brought him back to play a different character in Fury Road because he's not the same character. I'm pretty sure.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's just pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't
All
think
right.
it's a different take, but it was that movie actually made it onto syndication already. So I saw it recently.
Oh, really?
But with commercials and edited for television.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think I saw it on Sci-Fi or TNT or something.
Ooh. That seems like it ruined the experience.
It doesn't have the same not the same. Yeah, not the same.
Yeah. It's also one of the only movies I can think of where the title character is actually not the star of the film. Like he's not. He's like a bit player.
Yeah.
Furiosa.
Yeah, and they're making a prequel for her character.
I saw that. It's very cool. And I think they casted the girl who's in Queen's Gambit, I believe, is going to play a younger. I believe that to be true. I thought I read that. I don't know if you've seen Queen's Gambit on Netflix. It's a great show.
Oh, Anna Taylor-Joy. Yeah, I just watched that as well. I binged that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
That was great.
The Rest of America. That was really good. All right. I feel like you and I could probably talk about TV
yeah,
and
you're right.
entertainment.
Anna Taylor-Joy.
Yeah. Our personal taste for the next hour, but I think the audience would tune up very quickly. No, that's good.
Yeah.
Want to know more about you. So, Lee, we're going to go into talk a little bit about the things you're comfortable doing and maybe some things you're not comfortable doing. So, first up, want to ask you about something that is inside of your comfort zone that's going to be outside of somebody else's.
I love being around people. I get my energy from being around people, and I have a lot of friends who've expressed to me that large groups, bars, events, give them anxiety or exhaust them emotionally. And I feel like I don't need to be the center of attention because I actually hate being the center of attention, but I love being in an environment with lots of people, and it does not give me any anxiety and it doesn't wear me down. So that's something that I love, and I love about myself, being social and being around people that I know a lot of people have anxieties around or secret sort of repressed fears about.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had another guest on. He's a former rock musician, and now he's a public speaker. Like for a living, he's an author, and he gets on big stages and speaks. And we were talking about this question. And it's the question I'm going to ask you. And so the flip side of this is what's something that is outside of Lee's comfort zone. And I want to offer this that I think you'll find this. I found this very interesting. What is outside his comfort zone is being in crowds of people. And I said, well, that's interesting because you're you were a musician and you played to some pretty big stages, and then now you're in public speaking. He goes, yeah, that's because I'm on stage and I'm away from the people. And his other thing that's outside his comfort zone is heights. So I said, okay, so what you're telling me is your worst nightmare is a stage dive. He goes, I would never stage dive. It's like two of his worst fears all wrap up into one.
It's funny.
Well, so Lee, what about for you? What's something that's outside your comfort zone?
That the story about the musician, it kind of connects to what's outside my comfort zone that's inside a lot of people's in a weird way, because I do love people and being social, and I get my energy from being around people. But one thing that has always been outside my comfort zone since I was a kid, I have a strange aversion emotionally to group, like organized fun, organized activity. I don't like group workout classes. I don't like, dodgeball. I don't like when there's a competitive element to the group activity. I don't like to feel that social pressure. To perform or to do well or to, be, look like I'm doing the right thing in the group.
Yeah.
So, like when I do workouts, if I like to do it solo or with a trainer one-on-one. I hate classes. They give me anxiety. And then, group sports where you have to be on a team and perform with that team. It makes me super uncomfortable.
You must absolutely hate corporate.
It's weird.
You must absolutely hate corporate team building events.
Oh my God, I hate them so much. They're just so mind-numbing, and I have definitely had to do them before, and boy, do I hate them.
Where you have to do a silly competition, we had
to one of my orientations for my jobs, we had to all do a puzzle together, and I'm like, why do we have to all do a puzzle together? What are you really trying to do? I mean, I just naturally think that I work well with people, and I think throughout my career I've proven that, and I don't think that I need an allegoric lesson to teach me to be a better collaborator. I just am a collaborator. It's part of what I do for a living. So to me, it just doesn't make any sense. Maybe it's useful for some people. I don't know.
Yeah, it's so funny because I do coaching and consulting work and leadership and team development stuff, and it's likely at some point, whatever company you're with at the time, it's likely that was a program that was sold. Like somebody made money on hey, we're going to have this idea for new employees. They're going to do a puzzle together. Yeah. And our specific methodology for how they're going to work well to do this is going to cost you $5,000 or $10,000. So funny.
Everything is a racket. I've learned. I've been learning. You'd think after, I'm 35, you'd think after 35 years being a professional in entertainment for 13, that you would realize that everything is a racket. But no, I'm continually surprised how much everything is a racket.
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny. So for those listening, if Lee ever comes and works at your company, give him a break on the team building stuff. Let him go and have a coffee with somebody one-on-one or something, but no team building.
Thank you. I am so much better just in the work environment, doing the work day to day, building those relationships. It's so much more organic and useful in the long run than doing a puzzle together.
This reminds me, are you a Seinfeld fan at all?
Yes. Big time.
This reminds me of the episode where Elaine gets puts on weight because it's every day there's a new party in the break room, and she's just I can't
do it. I've been there. I've been there.
It's so funny. That's awesome.
Goodness.
Awesome, Lee. So next up, and I know you do a lot of stuff on stage. I think we're going to get into a little bit more about what that looks like outside of your producing things. But what would you talk about if I gave you 5 minutes? If I had the magic power to give you a platform for 5 minutes to give a message out to all of us here in the world, what would you talk about and why?
Man, that's a great question. I mean, I would talk about the value of being informed and the value of and actually I know there's a question coming later that I've already prepared the answer for, and it's related to this. But I just think that there's such a lack of curiosity and a lack of just knowledge in the world, and the willful desire to not attain it. And I think figuring out a way to communicate how important it is to be curious and informed, and to be media literate, and to have a little bit of understanding of how your own brain works, I think would go a long way for people making better decisions in their lives. I'm a big lover of the Freakonomics podcast. And
Me too.
Gladwell. And while I don't subscribe necessarily to a philosophy, I do think just learning about yourself and your brain and human tendencies and getting that kind of information can really help you, I think, navigate the world better. So being curious,
I love Stephen
and
Dubner.
Informed are very important.
Yeah, I'm a big Freakonomics podcast fan. It's great. I the books were great. Did you read the books too?
I read the first one.
Yeah, super interesting.
I haven't read the other ones.
Super
I know there's
smart.
one or two more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, once you make money on one book, you got to do more
really,
books.
Really important.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
Cool. Yeah. So your speech would be on something around like stay curious.
Yeah, the value of curiosity and the value of education, I guess, is really what the broad umbrella
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But self-education in a way that is intelligent and not. I just think there's just sources are very hard. Like just knowing where something is coming from and trusting that either it's a bad source or a good source is very important. Because there is a lot of information out there, obviously, that you can put in your brain, but not all of it's good information.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Being able to differentiate that, I think, is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome.
Media literacy.
Media literacy. All right, we're going to take a real quick commercial break, and we'll be right back after this.
The Talking to Cool People podcast is brought to you by Jason Frizzell Coaching. Jason works with amazing people who are looking to find and develop their passion and purpose and create their journey to wherever it is they want to go. Check us out at jasonfrizzell.com, Facebook, or on Instagram. Jason loves hearing from anyone who thinks it would be cool to connect, to be coached, or to be a guest on our show. Email him at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com or DM him on Facebook and Instagram. And now, back to some more amazing conversation on Talking to Cool People.
All right, Lee, we are back. And
Hello.
this is the part of the show where the guest gets to talk about what they're up to now, what they've done in the past. In other words, you have a blank slate, my friend, to share anything I've had. Yeah. I had one guest who's like, it was really funny. I'm like, journey today. He's like, well, I was born in New Mexico and went to grade school here. And like, I'm not going to stop it, but he actually gave his life story, which is funny because it tells you the context of how people see their journey. Like, is their journey like from inception into now? And some people they'll give like 2 minutes to be like, well, I used to do this and now I do this and now I'm married and now I do this. And what's the next question? So it's interesting, but to see how people like to reflect on their own life. So now I am practicing curiosity with you. So Lee, how do you want to address this question?
You know, when I hear that question, I automatically go to like career history and like work history. And I don't know what that says about me, but that's kind of where my brain goes. And I think partly maybe it's because I work in an industry that people define their existence by sometimes. And I don't know that I'm any different for better or worse. So we're talking about me now, huh?
Yeah, Lee, I'm gonna shut up over here, which is a breakthrough for me, and let you just do your thing. And I'm not gonna totally shut up. I'll ask you some questions, but
sure. Yeah. So I mean, I think I mentioned at the top of the show, I'm a producer in Los Angeles, and obviously I mentioned I love film, and growing up, my mother. My grandmother were huge film lovers, are huge film lovers, and we used to sit down and watch like every Hitchcock movie or every Woody Allen film when I was a kid. And so like I got like a great sort of like film education in that way. And my friends growing up were film nerds, and I originally wanted to be I wanted to be a lot of things, but I thought I was going to go into the medical field. I love human biology. I was doing science research classes in high school and studying, some genetic stuff. And also I got into learning about like, calories and lipids and cholesterol research. Yeah. I wanted to be a cardiologist. And then my high school reopened film club, which they hadn't had for years. And in film club, I met a friend of mine who's still a friend to this day, who lives in LA as an editor. He's an editor and a filmmaker. And we just started making movies together. And then basically all I did for the second half of high school was make movies for everything. If there was an essay, I made a movie. If there was a presentation, we made a movie.
That's cool.
And I kind of stopped thinking about anything else. And so I went to college for television and radio, which is my degree. I went to Ithaca College in upstate New York. Shout out to the Roy H. Park School of Communications. Very good communications, film, and whatnot school. So I went there, and they have a Los Angeles program, which is what was attractive to me. They've been doing it for 25 years. And I was able to come out to LA for a semester and do internships at movie production companies and start making those relationships and get that education. And when I graduated, it was a no-brainer. I moved out here with 40, 50 friends because everybody did the same thing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I started working in film. I was an assistant to a producer for many years. A guy named Beau Bauman, who's still a producer to this day, great mentor to me. I worked for the director of a Disney movie, which was an incredible experience. It was a movie called Prom that came out in 2011, I think. I worked on that movie from the second day of casting to the red carpet when I was, 23, 24. And that was like an amazing education to watch a studio movie get made from that vantage point for that whole time. Then I found my way working in helping Russell Brand, the comedian, at his production company at Warner Brothers. So I worked sort of as the office manager, development assistant for them. But I kind of got, tired of not making things for myself and not being a producer. And I was still very young as producers go, but I got a little impatient. And I'd been making short films. Some went to film festivals, but around 2012, 2013, some collaborators that I had been working with, we decided it was time to make the jump and to try to make a feature film. So we raised money, begged, borrowing, and stealing from family and friends and Kickstarter and a whole bunch of different avenues, and went off into the desert and shot this movie. And it was the most horrifying and important experience I think I've ever had as a producer. I was a bit in over my head, but that's that. Talking about making that movie is a podcast in itself, so I won't get too into the weeds into that. But you know, that experience really got me into being a paid producer as my job, which is what I'd always wanted. I still haven't made another movie since then, so the dream is still to make movies and TV shows. But you know, the best way that I was able to survive in the business and to continue to be a producer was to get into branded entertainment, music videos, commercials, ad supported stuff, and then also the digital space. So I became a producer at a production company that was co-owned by Scooter Braun, the music manager, and an ad agency called BBH. We made some cool stuff. Then I worked at Funny or Die for a couple of years, worked with a bunch of comedians, made a lot of high profile like sketch videos and marketing campaigns. And then I've been at NBC for 3 years, most recently producing shows for Snapchat and for YouTube, working with all their brands. And then, when the pandemic came, NBCUniversal closed our department, which was, a bummer, but it was a great 3 years and a great education. Yeah. And I actually just landed a contract producing job with TikTok. So my screens keep getting smaller.
Congratulations. There you go. Yeah.
Thank you. Hopefully that happens and becomes something fun. But yeah, so it's not movies, it's not television, but I'm still producing. And I started a production company, which we can talk about. Awesome. But that's a comedy-focused production company with some business partners who I've known for years, and we're developing TV shows and movies, and we're in the middle of post-production on a scripted audio show with Audible, which is very cool. Announced. Yeah, it hasn't been announced yet, but we're in post-production, and hopefully it's going to come out second quarter of next year. So that's exciting.
Yeah, keep me posted, and when that comes out, I will add it to the show notes so people can actually check that out when they listen to the episode. I have I have a couple of questions for you that popped into my mind. First question, I'm not in the entertainment industry. I don't know anything about it. I love it, but I'm a big consumer, don't do anything with it other than consume. So I'm wondering, and I've had a couple of friends who have gone out to LA and done some stuff pretty successfully. I'm curious, you said you and I think you said 45 or 50 other people kind of picked up and moved to LA. In LA, is it like new people come in and people who haven't gotten what they want out of it, they leave? Or is it kind of a neutral state around the amount of people who want to work in entertainment, or is it constantly growing? I guess what I'm kind of asking is, what's the relationship between new people coming in and people moving out? And being from New York, it's kind of the same thing, right? Like a lot of people move to New York, then people will have families, or they'll decide it's too expensive, or they want something different, then they'll move out to the suburbs or move away from the tri-state altogether. What's it like in LA, specifically around the entertainment industry and the people who work in that industry?
Sure. It's an interesting question that I have thought a lot about. And what's funny is it's a complicated one that I'll try not to bore you with my answer with. But when I came out in 2007, 2006, 2007, 2008, pre financial crash, pre 100-day writer's strike, pre rise of YouTube, right? So a lot of things happened between 2008 and 2010 that seismically shifted what my answer is going to be. So
got it.
What I would say is that in 2000, when I moved out here, I feel like I moved out here in the last sort of breath of the old Hollywood system, agencies, Supreme, tons of development deals, creative executives, like mountains and mountains of executives at different companies, people all over the place doing very specific segmented jobs. And I think that kept a steady flow of people. And yes, people would burn out. They would get frustrated. Their dreams wouldn't happen, fast enough for them, let's say, or they had some very legitimate, very bad experiences that soured them on the industry, which unfortunately does happen to a lot of people. But in general, there was a big universe of work. And then 2008, 2010, those confluences of events of rise of reality television, rise of YouTube in the digital space, the writer strike that put a lot of scripted content down, the economic collapse that closed a lot of production companies. I would say that put a huge dent in the growth of the entertainment industry from people moving out here, and a lot more people were leaving. And then what happened is LA as a city became more diverse in its offerings. So the arts scene, the food and beverage scene, a lot of things between 2011 and 2015 grew in the city, where a lot of people started coming to LA again, but it was for not necessarily entertainment. It was more space, more affordable housing, more diversity of experiences, and less for entertainment. Even though obviously that pipeline still exists. There was also a boom in film school, people going to film school. So there definitely has been, at a certain point in the past 10 years, more people being interested in it. But I think the old school nature of Hollywood and sort of the new universe we're living in are very different.
Got it. That's super interesting. Thanks for sharing that. I was like really curious about that, because I know it's one of those things. I just, like, speaking of curiosity, I know nothing about it because it doesn't really affect my life. And then the second question I have for you, is for anybody who's listening, who's interested in getting into the entertainment space, LA, New York, wherever, I know that I think Atlanta is a hotbed now because of Canada and things like that, because of a lot of the tax implications. What kind of advice would you give to somebody who's like, hey, Lee, I know you worked in this, I know you've been out there for 13 years and you've done some good stuff. And what's the sort of advice you'd give to somebody who's just popping out of school now, or maybe wants to make a career change and move into entertainment?
Sure. A couple of things I would say. You really have to love it. You really have to. I think everyone who is in entertainment for the long run has a mental problem. I think we all have a screw loose somewhere. There's something about us that's just like, no, I don't care how hard this is. I don't think that I really can do I don't really think I could do anything else. Yeah. And I think for longevity in the entertainment business, you need to have that kind of attitude. Most folks that I know who kind of left and burnt out, I don't know that they wanted it enough in a weird way. They probably did want it, but too much didn't swing their way in too short amount of time. And it, but honestly, better for them. I think emotionally, financially, security wise, this is an insecure business. Yeah. And if you want a life that is more more stable, this might not be the business for you as well. But if you're wanting to break in, I would say educate yourself about what kind of jobs there are. There's all kinds of work in the entertainment industry. There's trade crafts, there's production jobs, there's creative jobs, writing, there's different, places to do the kind of, entertainment work, but at tech companies, like there's the space is wide open. So sort of defining what success is for yourself.
Yeah.
And sort of figuring out what aspect of the business is most interesting to you. And you might not know when you're starting out. So it might just be easier to just start PAing and getting on set and meeting new people. I mean, one thing about entertainment is that it's an incredibly socially driven business, which is one reason why I think the pandemic is really going to put a dent in how people maneuver the entertainment industry, because so much happens between takes, so much happens between meetings, so much happens at the bar, or at, after work or at the comedy show, So I think being part of the community is the best way to break in, because, if you're a good person and you work hard and you're good at your job, people are going to want you around. It's just the way it's just what's going to happen. Opportunities will start to manifest as long as you're present and you're a good person and you do good work. But I think defining what it is also very helpful, because it'll help you target what to look for, what to do next.
That's great advice, Lee. Thanks for sharing that. And thanks for sharing your journey. And I know you're up to some cool stuff. Congratulations on the TikTok thing. Although your screen may be getting smaller, it sounds like your audience size and your reach is getting larger.
It's very true. When I made shows for Snapchat previously, and I was like, more people have seen this thing that I made than anything I've ever made before. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, very nice. All right, let's move on to the next section, which is where you get to play the host and I get to be the guest for a couple minutes. And you get to ask me anything that you want, and I will do my best to answer it if I can. I've never said no to somebody. So Lee, from curiosity, what would you like to ask me about? What can I answer? What can I answer for you?
Well, I know that you started the podcast to sort of, I assume to just kind of get conversations going with people that are interesting, but what's been most interesting that you've learned through the process of doing this podcast, either from an individual or just from an umbrella standpoint of like what the podcast has meant and done for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've never had this question either. I've had people ask me why I started the podcast, but this is, I think this is a more specific thing. Oh man, it's a good one. I got to think about that for a second.
No worries, take your time. We can edit this out.
Yeah, we'll edit this out. Probably won't. I want to edit this out. Like we like to be real here on the show. I think the thing that I've realized from this podcast is, and I think this is why you and I hit it off too, is like just how much I'm really interested in humans. And I was like, I want to do a podcast and I want to ask these questions. And yes, it's a list of questions, but I want to keep it free flowing. And what I've found is, this will be my 56th episode recorded. I haven't released quite that many, but that's quite a few people to talk to in 1 year. And I have yet to get the least bit bored of it, because it's just so interesting to me. And your story is interesting to me. And the person I talked to last night, I've known for 10 years. We've been friends for 10 years, and he does something extremely different for you. And we had a great conversation. And I think for me, the biggest takeaway of all this is, if you look at my list of guests, I have people from literally all walks of life, like college students, very successful authors, speakers, people that are famous in their space, influencers. I've had some actors on, and at the end of the day, people are just people. And it's actually really refreshing, because when you just start to talk about what most people kind of care about, the same things, whether you're famous, you're not, you're rich, you're not, you're unemployed, you have run your own company, everybody is actually just for the most part, a pretty good human being. And it actually gives me a lot of hope. And yes, partially it's like who says yes to my podcast. Of course, there's like, and yes, I know this is a sample size of like, they know me or they know something about me and want to be on my show. But no matter who I talk to and what they're up to, the thing that's always the most interesting, and it's kind of funny because you said this earlier, a lot of people will want to come on to talk about either their career or their book or something else, but the things that people get most passionate about are not the things about their career. They're like, oh, what are you passionate about? What do you what do you nerd out about question? The reason I actually start with that is because that's what people really care about.
Right.
It's like, what do you nerd out about? And for some people, it is their job. And for you, you've actually been somebody who's happened to be able to marry, I nerd out about entertainment and film, and I happen to work in that. For other people, it has nothing to do with what they nerd out about. And so I think the biggest lesson learned is that people are really. Sorry, my computer just screwed over again. This is so annoying. Can you hear me now?
You're back. Yeah, you're back.
Cool. Okay, cool. I'm going to start back at that sentence and remember what I was saying. Okay, here we go. The best part about this podcast and the number one lesson is that just people are really just human. Everybody's like really normal, and everybody's got their good days and bad days and the stuff they're insecure about and the stuff they care about. And man, I just, it gives me hope, and it gives me faith that like, if we just treat everybody, and this is cheesy, it's like the golden rule. If you just actually went out and looked at a Lee and a Jason and everybody else, and you stripped away all the ego and you stripped away all the competitiveness, and yes, I'm extremely competitive and I have an ego, so I'm including myself in this, and you stripped away all that stuff, and you just like connected with people, the world is awesome. It's all the other stuff that gets on top of that I think creates most of the issues in the world. And I'm talking again about social issues, not about things like even things like poverty, but I'm talking more about like political angst and crime and things like that. A lot of it just comes down to like we're just not connecting with each other. And so the biggest lesson is connecting with somebody is, for me personally, and it sounds like you're kind of like this too, it's one of the greatest experiences you can have as a human, is just truly connecting with somebody, getting to know what they're up to, what do they like, what do they not like, and relating to them. It's just a ton of fun. And I can't wait to keep this podcast going for as long as I want to, because it's just an absolute delight. So I think that's my biggest lesson. In terms of guests, I actually can't pin it down because, man, I've had so many amazing people on and I've learned so much from them. And I can't even come up with one thing right now because there's just too much good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. Like, I in my career have had to encounter, work with, deal with whatever, celebrities, people of note, pretty high profile people. And, one of my business partners, one of my two of my business partners are big producers of live comedy. And they also have to deal with a lot of big personalities and whatnot. And, we've done some work, some client work where we've had some big celebrities come through, and there's always this like weird reverence or weird insecurity you can sense, you can feel on set when the celebrity is about to show up, or when everyone's waiting for the celebrity. And one of the reasons why I think my producing partners are so loved by a lot of comedians and a lot of performers, and also really relate to celebrities, is that they just treat them like people. It's like when they come to set, it's like, hey, how are you? Good to see you. Thanks for being here. There's no undue or unneeded sort of reverence or insanity. It's very much like, yes, we're both people. You are a human being. You have needs. I have needs. We're here to do a thing, and that's fine. And let's do that thing. Yeah. And that's why I think people respect my partners and myself, I hope. Yeah. Because we just treat everyone like people, as people should be treated.
Yeah, I know a few celebrities. I'm not really friends with any celebrities, but I've had like a really normal conversation with a quite famous actress at an airport a few years ago. There's somebody who lives near where we live he's an A-list actor, and I see him around town, and like they're just people who happen to be really good at what they do. But when you relate to them, they have all their own stuff, right? Like some of these people have so many insecurities, or like, hey, like I just see them with their family, they look super normal, and you're like, hey, how's it going, blank? And they're like, hey, good to see you today. And it's like it's just normal, and they just have me. Now I think there are some famous people that don't actually want to be treated as normal, but I think the other thing that's cool.
This is true.
Yeah, And I think specifically when you think about like actors and actresses specifically, I remove like athletes and politicians from this, but I think, are there any actors that didn't struggle at some point? I feel like most people that you hear about, like they had this moment where they're, they haven't, like, I feel like somebody like Dwayne Johnson, right? Like he's been famous since, I guess, coming out of college and going into wrestling. But I'm pretty sure he said that like there was times when he's like, I'm real close to being done. Or people that are like have these stories of like coming back from addiction or all these things. And I think there's something really, really touching about these people that work in the entertainment industry. They're just like, hey, like I've been there and I get it. And then they give back, or they're willing to give advice or give somebody a shot. And I just think that's so cool. And I just think that's so cool.
Everyone comes from somewhere, you know, and most people, even if they're hugely famous, we're not always famous. And also, you know, I mean, this business, like I harp on, is very hard, but actors and writers, my God, like they put themselves out there, especially actors, because it's their face, it's their body. Yeah. And there's so much scrutiny on them all the time. To perform and to be a certain way. You know, I mean, yes, you can say yes, but some of them are really rich and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, money aside, they're human beings. And they've had to go through some shit, a lot of them. And they did not wake up famous. And it's hard for people to remember that. No one woke up famous most of the time, except for, I don't know, the Queen or something, you know?
Right. It also seems like if you happen to wake up or are born into famous, it kind of feels like you crash and burn most of the time.
Yeah,
you generally have the. Yeah, well, there's the Justin Bieber has a song out right now that's I think it's called Lonely. It's specifically about how you watched me grow up when I was a kid and like you saw me crash and burn. Yeah, because it's just a lot of pressure. But thank you. That was a really good question, Lee. I've never had that one. I appreciate you giving me the space to answer that. And it actually brought up a lot of cool feelings for me about, and quite honestly, gratitude, because I've been doing this podcast. I released it on January 6th of this year. And so I think this is, I've got a couple more to record this year. I'm going to take a couple weeks off the end of the year and not release, but I'm grateful. I'm really grateful to all of the guests who have said yes to me, whether they know me or not. I'm really grateful for all the people that listen, because it really is an absolute pleasure to do, because it's something I enjoy, but it's also something I enjoy giving back to the world, and hope that people find value and have fun listening to great conversations like what Lee and I are doing. So thanks for the question, Lee. It's awesome.
No problem. Someone just knocked on my door for some reason.
Sure. Yeah, go check it out.
Sorry about that. Hold on one second.
Yeah, of course. All right, Lee. So back to you.
Hello.
Lee.
Yes.
Here we go.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you this question, and you've been sharing this with us already, but I'm going to ask this to you and maybe get specific and ask you about something that you're passionate about, and maybe something that you haven't shared with myself and the audience quite yet. So I'm curious, Lee, what is it that you're passionate about?
Oh man, something I haven't shared yet. I'm very passionate about, oh, sorry. Hold on one sec. I'm sorry.
Yes.
They're sure. Finishing up.
Sure. All right, Lee, going to take it back to you. So next question I have for you is, what's something that you are passionate about? And I'd like to take a look at something that you maybe haven't shared with us yet. So asking again, what is something that you're passionate about? And caveat is, you haven't shared anything about this with us yet.
The two things that come to mind, well, I've always been passionate about music and sort of the idea of the history of music, and that being something that people kind of keep precious and understand. I think so much about American culture and American identity is woven through so much popular music. Mm-hmm. And I always get really excited when, you know, like young generation or younger folks or older folks sort of develop an appreciation for a different generation's music. Mm-hmm. And I think if you follow the history of music in the United States, it can tell the cultural, the economic, the darker and the lighter parts of American culture. And so I think through that kind of sort of education and that kind of experience, I think people are expanding their minds naturally. And I'm watching it happen now on YouTube and on TikTok, not to plug my future employer, but, watching, the Fleetwood Mac song Dreams become number one because it was in a TikTok video. And I just think that gets me so excited when I see that, or watching, the Twins, the new trend on YouTube, like react to, Jolene and Dolly Parton and watching people trace history backwards through music to get all the way to slavery and to immigrants and to, all of the important things. And so I love watching that cultural conversation that happen. And also, and I kind of geek out and I get passionate about that.
That's cool.
And then the other thing I'm becoming increasingly passionate about is, and it's obviously been laid bare by the pandemic, is the idea of food insecurity. Because as you said, I love restaurants. As I mentioned, I love restaurants and food, and it's a part of my life. And the thought that so many people are going hungry, especially in our own country, has been really gnawing at me since the pandemic started. So I've been trying to, give to food banks, and there's a lot of local LA food programs that are, popping up here and there to help people who are having issues, economically depressed and looking for ways to feed their families. And so that's become something that I'm increasingly passionate about and hope to do more with when the pandemic, even when the pandemic is over. And I really love, this all started with One World Kitchen. I think that's Jose Andres's, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that's his nonprofit. And I remember during the Brazil Olympics, I think it was One World Kitchen in Brazil Olympics. I could all be wrong, but there was an organization that was taking all of the food from the Olympic Village that was being thrown out and unused and repurposing it for food for the communities in Brazil.
Oh, that's cool.
And to feed people who needed food. And so things like that, I'm increasingly realizing are a passion and are important to me. And so I haven't quite gotten as involved yet as I hope to. I think the pandemic has kind of kept me in my apartment and this dealing with the unemployment and just thinking about that. But now that I'm feeling a bit more secure in where I am, I feel like I'm better equipped to help others
very nice
at the moment. So
that's cool, Lee.
So yeah, those are two things I get passionate about.
I love it. I want to give you full permission if you'd like to have TikTok sponsor this episode or my entire podcast. I'm totally cool with that.
I will, once I get in there, I'll make it.
Yeah. If TikTok wants me to create promo videos on TikTok for the podcast, I'm down for all of it. I am happy to go talk to people in marketing at TikTok to sponsor my podcast, as long as TikTok marks it as well. That would be great.
For sure.
And again, congratulations on the TikTok thing. That's an exciting brand to work on and an interesting one. I was going to ask you. You mentioned TikTok earlier. I haven't been following. What's the latest on with the kind of like at some point the administration was going to ban them from the US and they're going to be bought by, is it still being acquired by somebody? I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been definitely a mess. I mean, I only know what I've read in the press. It's my understanding there was recently, like this week or last week, they put any kind of ruling or decision on hold.
That makes sense.
Some superior court somewhere was just like, hey, let's just chill on this for a minute.
Yeah.
So, I don't really know what the future is for the company. I think there's a larger conversation that's obviously brewing now when it comes to technology, how information is shared and antitrust. Facebook is about to have a whirlwind 2021 when it comes to, antitrust legislation.
Yeah.
So 2021 is going to be an interesting year for tech
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
Overall.
It's a big news story about the Facebook, lawsuit
Yeah.
that has been brought. It's, super interesting.
Mhm.
Okay. Next question I have for you, Lee.
Yes.
What is the thing that you're most proud of?
Thing that I'm most proud of. Oh, that's broad because that could be in life or in work or both.
Or it could be the thing in work. Well, just to point out to you that your work is inside of your life. So there's
That is
also
true.
that.
That is very, very true. I mean, I'm definitely in work. I'm most proud of the feature film that I mentioned earlier
Mhm.
because it was the hardest thing I've ever done. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. It was the most emotionally and physically taxing thing I've ever done. It was the most educational experience I've ever had, that especially one that I created for myself, as opposed to like I put myself in a situation where I was forced to learn as I went. And I was humbled by how much I didn't know. Like I thought I knew something, and I did know something, but I didn't know nearly as much as I needed to do the thing. And the fact that we accomplished it and made it with a lot of help, financial, emotional, physical, from a lot of people, and that even though it's not the most perfect thing, it exists and we made it.
Yeah.
And that also helped give me the confidence to springboard me to what would be the next chapter of my career.
Nice.
So I think career-wise, that's the thing I'm most proud of. And then personally, I just really value that I've managed to maintain a lot of very strong friendships. Friendships. There's a very close group of friends that I grew up with that I've known, some of them since I was 10 years old or younger even, or, from middle school through high school through college. And we are all extremely, extremely close. And,
That's cool.
And we live in different parts of the world, but thankful to technology, it's been able to keep us all feeling like we're close, even though we're far away. And so in general, and maintaining friendships, but in specific, maintaining those friendships has been really special to me.
Very cool. That's awesome, Lee. All right.
Yeah.
Next question I have for you is about things you might be afraid, but not in the external world, but actually inside of you. So what is something that you're afraid that might actually be true about you?
I'm afraid that I don't care about people as much as I think I do or want to. Sometimes I worry that I don't care enough. That's definitely something I think about.
Would you be willing to expand a little bit on that? That's really interesting to me.
Yeah. So, I care. I know I care about the well-being of my friends, but I also, sometimes worry that either it's because I just don't have an extremely strong, like, I don't know. It's hard to describe. Like I've been in situations in my life where people around me are just exasperated by a person's behavior, let's say, or a decision a person made. And whether that be a politician or a person in their interpersonal life. And while I care that it's affecting people, I sometimes worry that I'm in such a privileged position, even though, yes, been unemployed, there was no nepotism in my career or anything like that. But I grew up very advantaged. I'm very grateful for that. And sometimes I worry that the advantage that I had growing up has made it easy for me to just sort of continue barreling through life without having to really assess how certain things affect other people in a real way. And I just, things that roll off my back don't roll off a lot of other people's backs. And sometimes I worry if it's just because I just don't care enough, if that makes any sense. And I sometimes wonder if that's sometimes I think it's a negative, sometimes I think it's a positive, and then it's allowed me to keep moving forward in my life.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So what I hear in that is, and the reason I ask this question is a lot of the, I do coaching work. So a lot of the things that we believe to be true about us they feel factual to us, but they're not necessarily a fact at all. They're just an assessment, or usually it's the thing that you'd believe. Right. So how this landed for me, Lee, is that you like to show up for people as an empathetic and supportive person, but the fear that you have is that perhaps you're not quite as empathetic as you either appear to be or want to be. And by that, I think that's a really normal thing. I know for me, I would consider myself, I'm a pretty empathetic, heart-based person most of the time. And yes, there's times when I maybe will lean into that, and it's not completely, you can use those powers for a lot of things. And it's easy to judge yourself to be like, oh, am I being nice to this person because I want to get a job with them? I know they have, at the end of the day, at a basic level, human beings, we're all narcissists in some way. We're all about what is the thing that we want and how can other people help us get it? And I know that's a bold statement, but I think just from a biological perspective, at the end of the day, we're all animals, and animals are built for survival. And so when we look at something that's hey, I can do this thing and it's going to help me survive or thrive or get me what I want. So I totally feel you there. I think that's actually something that for myself that you brought something up in me to think about, is that something that I believe to be true about me too. And I think there's an element of that for sure. And it doesn't mean, and just to be clear, in the way I look at this question, this doesn't mean that this is actually true about either you or I. It's our internal voice that's probably hardest on us. That's hey, this might be true about you. And the follow-up to this I have for you is, how do you compensate for that, for that fear then? What do you know to be true about yourself, or how do you compensate for that?
I think I approach a lot of those types of situations with humor. It used to be sarcasm. I've become less sarcastic as I've gotten older, but I definitely approach things with humor and then disarm a situation usually with logic, or I try to. My brain functions illogically on an emotional level, but very logically when it needs to. Almost fault, where it's just this is the way that, yes, this person did this, or this is the way it is, but either you're going to do something or you're not going to do something. Live with it, don't live with it, figure it out, and so it's either with just harsh logic or disarmed with humor. And then I kind of move on. I don't sit with it as much unless it's really, really impacted me personally. Then it really shifts into my brain. Gotcha. And then it really starts to give me anxiety and gnaw at me for a long time.
Yeah. And then we get to go into a therapy session, and I am not a trained therapist.
That's how I think I sort of approach those situations.
Yeah, that's funny. And then we move into a therapy session. I'm not a trained therapist. On the air for all of you, I'm going to screw Lee up because I'm going to try and do something that I am not trained to do. So that would be funny. Thanks for sharing that. And thanks for being vulnerable with that. That would be an interesting podcast. Come and get therapy.
I have no problem being right from a non.
Come get therapy from somebody who's not a therapist. Yeah, the armchair therapist. Yeah, we have Dax Shepard, the armchair expert. I'll be the armchair therapist, and I will literally get emails from therapists you are harming people. Stop it. You don't know what you're doing. Stop it right now.
Yeah, this is definitely not ethical.
Yeah, this is unethical. It's actually illegal.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely, I have no problem. I think about my thoughts a lot to a fault. And so it's not, and I have no problem talking about them usually.
Yeah. Cool.
Because, I think it's just human.
Yeah. Nice. So we're getting near the end of the time today, and I just have a couple other questions for you. So the first question I have is, if there's anything that's come up from our conversation today, either something that I've shared, something that you shared, or you had that ahas where both of us are talking, that you'd like to go back to and share with the audience at this point, and the answer no to this question is completely fine as well. So is there anything, Lee, that's popped up that you want to share with the audience at this point?
Uh, no, I think it might have come and then gone, and then we've gotten into other topics. So I don't think
Cool.
there's anything that's been lingering.
Cool. Awesome. So Lee, how can the audience connect with you? And we're not going to put in your home address here, I don't think, or your phone number, but yeah, how can people connect with you? How can people find you if they want to, connect with you, learn more about what you're up to, bring you into some big jobs? They've been looking for somebody to help them do a feature film. No promotion here, but maybe some promotion. Yeah. So how can people connect with you, Lee?
Sure. I mean, I've got Twitter, Instagram, all the usual social platforms, and it's just my name. I'm very easy to find. I'm sure my name will be in the description of the podcast. So it's Lee Sachs on basically all of those platforms. Most of what I write on Twitter is things like retweeting comedians, interesting news articles, and making stupid comments about the world. Mm-hmm. And my Instagram is mostly food and beautiful landscapes that I see on my weekend drives around Southern California.
That's pretty awesome.
And then I have my production company has a website. It's my production company that I own. My partners is called OK Fine, and you can check it out at okfine.tv. That's okay. That's OKAY fine.tv. You can see what we do.
Nice. Thank you. Yeah, just to mention for the audience, all of the ways to connect with Lee will also be in the show notes. So you don't actually have to write any of these down. And yes, it sounds like you're one of the fortunate few that has like just your name as your handles. Yep. But yeah, all the links will be here at the website. So don't feel like you have to write this down as Lee's doing it. It's there in the show notes on whatever platform you're listening on. Click on it, go check it out. All right, Lee, it has been so great to get to know you today, to have you on. And tradition I have here on the show is to have my guests leave us with words of wisdom. And the words of wisdom, I usually say need to fit on a Post-it note or Instagram, but I'm going to say for you, it needs to fit in a TikTok video. In other words, it's got to be short and sweet. So what do you got for us?
I believe it's a theme that has been running through our conversation. Stay curious, stay informed, stay kind.
Stay curious, stay informed, stay kind. Thank you so much, Lee, for being on today. And I wish you the best of luck in your new role with TikTok. And don't forget, once you get in there, tell them that you know this great podcast you've been on that would like a sponsorship from TikTok. I hope to see you on TikTok at some point. Maybe you'll be one of the trending videos. I am not on TikTok because I'm afraid of it, because I don't know what to do on it. And yeah, best of luck with everything you're doing. And I have no doubt that we'll be speaking again in the near future.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here. Good to talk to you.
Thanks, Lee.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.